Welcome to BACKtalk, the premier podcast from successful Black Parenting Magazine, featuring in-depth conversations and expert insights on crucial topics for Black families. We are ranked number one on FeedSpot as the best Black family podcast, and we're second on number one. Well, sorry, we're second on as the best mom podcast. Got to get it right. Now we're number one on Million Podcasts as well. So we got a lot of awards going on. I'm trying to keep them straight. I'm your host, Janice Robinson-Celeste, and now Successful Black Parenting Magazine has an interactive community of like-minded Black parents called the Black Parenting Academy, where you can converse and post questions about parenting, comments, wins, and concerns in a safe space. And I will be sharing that link during the show, so watch for it. What would happen if we stopped seeing dropout rates as statistics and started seeing them as our own children's future? Generational trauma would be reduced, poverty would be interrupted, schools would be held more accountable, politicians would focus more on children's needs and not numbers. Would we fight harder for their education? Let's talk about it more after this message.
This is BACKtalk by Successful Black Parenting Magazine, the most listened to podcast for parents by parents.
Hello, successful Black parents. Thank you for tuning in to BACKtalk by Successful Black Parenting Magazine, your go-to podcast talk show for parents. We are live, and that means you can post your questions in the comment sections of our Facebook or YouTube page, and I will address your questions live on air. Don't forget to share our podcast with your friends, shout it out to followers, because sharing is truly caring. And don't forget to use hashtag BACKtalk when you post. Today in the studio, I have Dr. Terence Lester, and he is the author of his newest book, From Dropout to Doctorate. Okay, so welcome to the show, Dr. Terence.
Hey, what's going on? I'm excited to be here.
Well, thank you. Now, I gave you a short introduction, but you've done so much more. So can you introduce yourself to our audience and share a little bit about your journey from dropout to doctorate?
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, my name is Terrence. You can call me Terrence. Um, I would define myself as a servant leader that likes to show up from the heart. I love my family, my wife, and my children are my best friends. And I don't just say that with hyperbole. They are the most important people in my world. Um, I count it an honor and a privilege to be close to my children, and not just in a sense where like these are my children, like I'm their father, but like we have a in-depth relationship. And I like to tell people one of my greatest dreams is to watch them grow up. And everything that I've done up until this point in my life, as Dame Dash says, I'm hustling for my last name, not for my first, is to create a legacy for my children, and to also ensure that my ceiling is their floor. And so, my journey is one of many can identify struggles. Grew up in the 80s, was in a neighborhood and an environment on the southwest side of Atlanta that historically was defined by redlining. Normally, we think about redlining as some far off thing, but there are many Black communities that are suffering from the residue of what that has done in terms of the concentration of poverty in environments. And when you think about public policy, systemic injustice, when you think about impoverishment itself, poverty is a form of trauma, right? It creates the social living conditions that Black children have to grow up with. And, you have generational trauma, but you can also have multi-generational impoverishment, right? One of my friends and colleagues would like to say that sometimes when we see the residue of what history has done, we're seeing 20 and 30 and 40 years of impoverishment and trauma trapped into an environment. And then we ask children to become something that they haven't even been exposed to. And so I grew up in that type of context. I remember the dilapidated buildings, the underfunded schools. I remember that we were growing up in food deserts, but also remember the strength of the community, because sometimes people think that just because you're impoverished that you don't have brilliance, that you don't have something to contribute. And so there's a both andedness to how I grew up. But, I grew up in this environment that set me up for, I would say academic failure. Because if you can imagine a child growing up impoverished, exposed to violence, exposed to crime, and grew up with a lack of resources, and then dealing with the urban hassles, what you visually see on the ride to school, right? Um, whether it's potholes or environmental racism in terms of the air pollution or the dilapidation in buildings, or not being able to see any joy in the environment that you grew up in. And then that child goes to school, sits in a classroom and being taught lessons that doesn't actually speak to their existential realities. That was me. And so I remember, and I'll be quiet, but I remember one time I showed up in school and I had just seen violence the night before. I was in elementary school and I was still dealing with the trauma from the environment. And my teacher asked me a question in front of the whole class, and I didn't answer it because I was still dealing with the internalized trauma from that event the night before. And she got mad at me and locked me in the closet as a form of punishment.
Whoa.
And that was re-traumatizing, right? It
Mhm.
was, I was wrestling with what does home mean, but I couldn't even find safety in the school. And so when you think about the connection of policy that creates the social living conditions that produces the trauma that creates the educational outcomes, that was me. And so I struggled, but I have a story of how I overcame that. And I am fighting today, not only for those who I can identify with in the unhoused community and students, but also to ensure that my children never have to overcome any of what I suffered.
Right. We're going to
That's a
get.
long intro. That
No,
was
that's
long.
okay. That's okay. We love
Yeah.
stories. Um, I wanted to ask you, we're going to get back into your story, but we always ask our guests an icebreaker about what's something that most people don't know about you that you can share. And then we'll get into your story even
Yeah.
more.
Yeah. I love to cook. Um, that is something that brings me joy, and specifically for my family and friends. And so my grandmother, who is still alive, she's 93 years old. She was a chef, and she taught
Oh,
all the men in the family to cook. And so I don't know. I take pride in that. That's something I love to do.
that's a great thing. That's a great thing to cook for your family. Yeah, that's love,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, what grade did you drop out in?
Yeah. It was between 10th and 11th grade. I was supposed to be going to um, uh, the 12th grade, but I was kind of still in between those two grades. I'd gone to several high schools just trying to find a community where my mom would define where I could flourish. But I was never able to find that because I was still struggling with the emotional, social trauma from the environment that I grew up in. We had a lot of family conflict. And so every time I would go to school, I never felt fully present.
Mhm.
Imagine being a teenager, even running away from home, living out of the trunk of a car at a park, experiencing homelessness, some of the very hard things that you have to navigate, and then going to school and being labeled, why is this guy acting out or behaving in a certain way, or why is he falling asleep in the class, never really understanding my social location. And I ended up at an alternative school, and one day I felt the weight of the socialized and personal trauma so heavy that I decided that was the day I was going to stop going to school. I walked out of the class. For the three of my friends followed me, and not even 100 yards away from the building, It's called it was an alternative school, which was an open campus. This guy experiencing homelessness called over out to us, right? I was the only one to respond. I walk over to this guy. I still remember trash hanging from his beard, looked like he hadn't showered, had no clue of what I was carrying as a young man, like a young black teenager. And he points to that school. He says, "Young man, is that your school back there?" And I say, "Yeah." He says, "Whatever you do, don't stop getting the education." He looks himself up and down. He says, "Or you'll end up like me." And he then looks at me and he said, "Look at me." And I looked at him and he says, "One day you're going to be a leader." That was
Wow.
the disruptive moment in my life where, like, I don't know if you can imagine going through so much and then out of the blue, this stranger, which I
Yeah.
believe was an angel at that moment,
Mhm.
um, a messenger, like tells me that I was going to be a leader and to recommit to education. I do end up dropping out, and then eventually I go back as a fifth year senior, which I talk about in the book, or the proper term is fifth year persister. And my mom advocates for me to go back to school. And I meet Miss West, who's a teacher. I was fifth year senior in her 10th grade class. She heard the chatter from other educators. Why is he still here? She felt my sense of shame and
Mm.
embarrassment. And she also um, saw something in me. I would go in her class and she would literally call me brilliant and tell me I would be a leader and to always consider using her class as a sanctuary, right? um, she was practicing trauma-informed care and a trauma-informed pedagogy long before it became popular terms. And so Miss West became a champion in that space, but also this Black woman literally encouraged me until I was able to graduate. And so that began some of my earlier years in my journey.
We all need teachers like that and the safe
Yeah.
spaces like that. Absolutely, and the classroom should be that, and they're not that way for the most
Mm.
part. So I'm glad you were able to find Miss West. The day you left, was it want something that happened, or was it just an accumulation of things? But was it like this is the straw that broke the camel back? I'm leaving. Was it something like that?
Yeah. Man, so one of my favorite writers, sociologists, um, just kind of like communicators is Dr. Joy DeGruy. She writes a book called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. She kind of chronicles how trauma still shows up in the body for Black people connected to what we've experienced in terms of the enslavement, the lynching, the stigma, all of those things, right? And how we never had space to fully process what happened, right? Do we ever ask, as she's arguing, do we ever ask, has Black people been giving space to literally process the trauma that we all carry? And so, if you can imagine historical trauma, but then uh, the social trauma piece, right? What's going on in the late 80s, early 90s, just coming out of the civil rights movement, post Jim Crow, post civil rights, still trying to find our sense of self identity. Wrestling with the entrappings of public policy, the environments, all of those things, the social stigma. And here it is, a young Black child is experiencing all of this and not really having a place to fully articulate what it is that I'm experiencing. And then you add in the personal trauma piece. I didn't have anywhere to really process that. And so I would say it is a accumulation. And we have to even question and ask, what are our kids really carrying, right? They're carrying things, from environments that they don't have the words or the language to fully articulate. Obviously, in retrospect, I'm able to articulate and um, fully express myself now because that was years of work. I mean, you talk about therapy and writing and having safe spaces to be vulnerable and all of these things. These are really important topics that we have to consider. I gave a talk, a TED talk. For Collier Heights, right? And the name of my talk was Preserving Joy for Black Children, right? And in this talk, I kind of reflect on the first time I realized that I was a Black child. I start out with this conversation with my grandfather. He's talking to me about Emmett Till, and then I hear about Rodney King, and I'm starting to realize. And then, like even looking at research, Black children have an adult biological view of racial and social constructs as early as age 10 or 8, right?
Mhm.
Realizing that we're going to have different talks and be given different talks from our parents. We call this the talk, right? Which the talk is viewed as like this mainstay in African American families. Like at some point, children are going to be warned, like about police encounters or how to avoid discrimination. Like I still remember talks my mom was giving me: if you walk into a store, always keep your hands out of your pocket. When you're driving and a police gets behind you, 10 and 2 on the wheel. If you go in the store and you're going to pay for something, right, make sure you have your money visible so you aren't labeled as criminal. And so I reflect on this, but I'm also thinking about like what type of talk will I give my children, right? Obviously, there's the historical aspect of it, but how can I preserve the joy of my children, right?
Right.
Because this is important. I understand suffering, I
Mhm.
understand struggle, but I want to ensure that my children know what joy is, and that joy has to be normalized, right? And so
Mhm.
I can go on and on because I'm passionate about this, but
Right, good.
I think joy for Black children is so essential.
It is, and we should not have to live by separate rules of like going into store and having our money out and, hands on why can't we just live? You know what I mean? Just live. Leave us alone. Oh my gosh. That's all I just want to tell people all the time, why don't just leave us alone? We're fine.
Just leave me alone, you know?
Right. Right. Oh my
Yeah.
god. But you've been open about experiencing in your book everything from gangs, homelessness, dropping out of high
Mm.
school. What was the turning point? Was it Miss West that made you believe you could change your story, or was it more?
Well, I think it's a series of people. It,
Mhm,
it it was my mom as a
mhm,
Black woman who worked multiple jobs, still went to school, and seeing her resilience. Like shout out to my mom, Dr. Cunny Walker. Um, in retrospect, I didn't fully understand, sometimes her absence is because she was going to school long before online classes, working to get multiple graduate degrees to put us in a better position. She eventually goes on and earns her doctorate in clinical counseling and things like that. But I remember her in conversations, she would say, I had to survive being a single parent in early in my career off of less than $18,000. I mean, you think about the grit and the resilience. And she says, I don't even know how I was going to school. I remember even as a child, I would she would have to drive over an hour to go to school. She was working on her graduate degree, and I would sit in the hall and kind of do my homework and things like that. And I couldn't even fully understand what was happening, but she was practicing resilience. I remember her working a job outside of her career job at the time, on the weekends, doing everything she could to make enough to just be able to provide for her children. But it was also like teachers like Miss West. It was Mr. Shaw, who saw me in the absence of um, a positive male figure in my life early on, who stepped in and give offered me words of encouragement, even long after I made a lot of mistakes. It was Mr. Moore who called me a leader when I had run away from home and I experienced homelessness, and he said that one day I would be a leader. It was Mr. Eason who walked my wife down the aisle, but also became a mentor and helped me pay for my undergrad degree, who
mhm.
was a real estate developer and a wealthy guy who I met in church. He was a deacon in the church, and I told him my story when I was at 21 years old. I was working in the back of a warehouse, had no clue of how I would be able to get through school. I tell him my story one day, and he starts to become my mentor. He invests in me, and right before he passed away, right, this is years later. I've completed 5 degrees, PhD. I started a nonprofit organization advocating on behalf of those who are unhoused, the whole nine. He texts me this text, um, and he says, "You're one of the greatest investments that I've ever made." This guy developed subdivisions and apartment complexes and owned hundreds and hundreds of properties and all of these things. And you boil down
That's
your
great.
greatest investment in the life of a young person who you had potential, you saw potential in. And like I say all the time, like there were moments in my life where I had to borrow the courage and confidence that people had in me long before I had it in myself. And you said something so important earlier. You said that our words, the way that we use our words, are so powerful. They have the power and the potential to speak into the future of our children, of even those children that are not our own. There's a quote that I used to say all the time. It says, "People don't become in life what you want them to become. They become what you encourage them to become."
Yeah.
And it was the community of individuals along the way who kept showing up in my life when I needed it the most, that gave me the confidence and became pivotal moments in my life to continue to press forward and forward. Because you know it takes a lot to overcome uh impoverishment and imposter syndrome and scarcity and all of the things that could hold you back, right? And I get emotional about this because sometimes you have a survivor's guilt. Like I can go back, I still go back to my neighborhood, and I can visibly see how the entrappings did not afford other people opportunity to escape. And most times people say, well, you can pull yourself up. And it's, research shows, right? There's an article released by the Atlantic that it takes 20 years to overcome poverty, right?
Mhm.
Without having the social equity, the social piece, the social
Mhm.
wealth. I'm not just talking about economics, because poverty is more than economics. It's social, it's environmental, it's occupational, it's psychological, it's physiological, it's spiritual, it's all of these things. So like there's not a singular focus of impoverishment, and so you have to navigate all of those things to fully be well and have the courage and confidence enough to overcome some of these things. And so thank God for people who show up, you know and that's why I try to show up. And so I don't know if that answers your question, but man,
No, it's
I would
good.
not be who I am if it had not been for people who saw me.
Well, that's a great answer. And I just said yesterday to someone, I said, everyone needs at least one champion in their life.
Mm,
That one person, if you have several, like you definitely had several. That's even better. But you need somebody who believes in you, invests in you, who pushes you up. And I'm glad that you
mm,
had that. Now, let me
mm.
ask you, how can parents who might be listening to this, either the replay or live, encourage that same mindset in their own kids?
Yeah. So the part of the talk that I was talking about in the TED talk earlier, uh, I came up with like my own version of the talk, right? And it's the uplift talk, right?
Mhm,
And so, firstly, I'm starting with understanding that children need to be spoken to daily, like not talked down to, but just
mhm,
like natural communication. And I'm using this as an opportunity to fully know my child, right? Um, that's how I learned that my daughter had a passion for writing and a passion for the community service, and we co-authored a children's book and all that stuff. And I learned that my son has a knack for understanding insects and bugs and how things work, and his interests and all of these things. And so like I'm starting with this idea that children just need to be talked to daily, right? Because when we aren't talking to them, the world is, right? White supremacy
mhm,
is, like public policy is, erasure is, like all of these things when they walk out of my door is going to be speaking to them, whether directly or indirectly, right? And then another part of the talk is just understanding that Black children need to see positive images, like right all around our house. My wife and I intentionally have pictures and frames of us as a family, frames of other Black figures who are successful and have joy. And these pictures aren't just like pictures of suffering. These are pictures of joy. So like we make sure that the imagery that they are seeing is not just themselves in a stigmatized way. It is imagery that shows them that Black people are joyful people. Like we are filled with joy, and we have to push back and resist in this world that seeks to show us in dehumanizing ways. Um, I'm speaking to them verbally, but I'm also speaking to them non-verbally. I'm also learning about ways not only to talk to them about history, which is at the center of the conversation nationally, with a attack on museums that represents our full story. But I'm also having opportunities to learn the history that I don't even know with them. And the reason why this is because one, I'm modeling to them that I understand history and I'm sharing with them what I know, but I'm also using this as an exploratory moment, right? To learn with them, to say, hey, it doesn't matter when you become an adult, like you can always still learn and you can always still grow. And this is just kind of communicating to our children that you're never going to arrive. Like there's always room to grow, to learn, to understand, to become better, right? And then I invite them to ask questions, right? And I think sometimes parent-child relationships or even adult-child relationships, uh, we kind of adults can posture themselves as always being right, always having it all together, but I like to display vulnerability to my children and give them opportunities to ask me things that I'm learning, things that I've made mistakes in, things that I've had to overcome. And I think a part of that vulnerability gives them a lens to see not only my humanity as a parent, but also that I had to learn, right, from mistakes. Right. Wisdom is hard fought and hard earned sometimes. And so that gives them an opportunity to learn, just about my journey and things like that. And then as a, I guess just as a Black father, like taking them to do fun things, right? I think, even like how my people normally ask, like, why are your children so aware about, things in the community and stuff? It's like, because they've been serving with our and volunteering with our nonprofit organization since they were like, couldn't even walk or talk, right? And instead of using service or volunteerism as a form of punishment, right? Because sometimes parents can say, "Oh, you've been ungrateful. Let me drag you down to a shelter, or and show you, like what you shouldn't do in your life, or you'll end up like this," which reinforces the social stigma that we need to be resisting about what it means to be poor and unhoused in this world. And so I don't use service as an opportunity for punishment. Service is just a core value of our family. So service is just like going to the movies, just going out to eat, just like going to shop at your favorite store, just like going to serve. And it's normalized, right? And so this is, being able to model that from me and my wife's perspective, the children are catching not just what we are communicating to them, but also how we're showing up in the world because they're always watching. And then lastly, I'm like doing fun things with them. Right now I'm in the season. My daughter's a senior now. My son just entered into the ninth grade, and I'm starting to realize that it will be a different way that I show up as a parent. Um, and I heard it said one time that the older your children get, it's not about like a top down. It's about earning the influence and the respect of your children. And so And that's through friendship. That is through honesty. That's through all of those things. And most times, parents will think like, I'm not my my son's friend, my daughter's friend. You know,
Mhm.
like if you don't be, somebody else will, and they'll
Mhm.
influence them in a way that is could be detrimental, right? And so I think friendship is influence. So we have to reframe what that actually means. And so I'm just talking. I love my children. I hope that comes through clear.
Oh, it comes through, and that's great. We love that. Absolutely, as it should. What would you say to a single mom right now who may be doing the same things your mom did, had trying to make a better life, go to school, but she's impoverished and her children are impoverished, and to break that cycle of trauma and poverty for children? Like, what would you say to that parent?
Yeah. Personally, I would say that I personally cannot um, relate because right now at this present moment, I'm not a single parent. So I
Mhm.
just want to name that. Um, I've been married. I just made 19 years of marriage,
Congratulations.
and I am, yeah, thank you. And I'm grateful um, that I have a partner spouse that is journeying through this life with me uh, at this moment in time. However, I can say that watching my mom and her hard resilience and her grit and determination. I was just talking to her the other day, and she was just like, there was something in me that just would not allow myself to succumb to the circumstances that we were in. And she was like, yeah, I missed a lot of football games and I missed a lot, but I did not want to not give you all the opportunity in your future to be better or have the same opportunities as other kids did that had the both parents or grew up in a wealthier neighborhood and so on and so forth. And so what I learned from my mom was that her desire for her children to have better and to break the generational um, uh, some say curse, some say limited opportunities, whatever it may be, was greater than that she was carrying. And so I would say, you know, your labor is the seed, right? There's a famous quote that I love. You know, they tried to bury us, but they didn't know that we were seeds. And so your labor and your sacrifice is a seed for um, the future generation, and that is your children. The second thing, too, I learned from my mom is that she would always surround herself with a community of people. And if you don't have one, she said that she had to put herself in environments of people that was just slightly ahead of her, and that became a source of strength for her because out of that community was people who referred better job opportunities or older Black women who was able to give her advice or people who was able to stand with her as she was navigating the hardships herself. And then even for me, even when she wasn't able to fully reach me, that she would always just try to intentionally talk to my friends' fathers who were present in their lives just to kind of speak with me. And even looking back, there were some that I didn't gravitate towards, but there was like a Mr. Moore, right? There
Mhm.
was other male figures that I could connect to that I would listen to that would just drop seeds and gems. And so I don't know if that looks like, reaching out intentionally for, uh, someone to fill the gap and even become a sounding board. I don't know if that's involving yourself in the community. I don't know if that's having a creating a list of goals and dreams that you want to achieve, even if you don't see yourself in that state right now. Like always giving yourself something to look forward to, but also knowing that as you're striving, you're doing this for yourself, but you're also doing it for your seed, which are your children. And so, never give up, never lose hope. I'm a person of faith. Never stop believing that God can do the impossible for you. I firmly believe that, and you have to give yourself grace. you know, and say that I am doing enough even when you don't feel like it, because you are. To wake up every single day is a courageous act, right? Especially we have to name that in Suicide Awareness Month. There are a lot of people who just want to tap out and give up and say, I can't take this anymore. But you can. Your life does matter. Your life still has purpose. You are doing a good thing by being present in your child's life. Never, never, never give up. Never give up.
One day can make a difference. It can change your whole life, and that's what I found out. So, you going along thinking, "Oh, things aren't going right," and then that one day, it just one
One
thing and
day.
one day, or it can change everything. I wanna know more about Zion's Closets. That's inspired by your daughter,
Yep.
and you have it in Atlanta schools to support students in poverty. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So me and my daughter co-authored a children's book called Zion Learns to See. It chronicles just our relationship and how she would go to work with me and learn about um, people experiencing homelessness. And like she just started to develop a lot of passion. And one day she comes to me, I think at age 10, and says she wants to write a children's book. Well, years later, I started writing books myself. And then my publisher approached me to write a children's book on a subject that the field that I work in. And I was like, I'm not doing this without my daughter. And they gave us an opportunity to, and we published it. And then we started to ask ourselves, like, how could we make this something tangible? And my daughter has always been very aware of, like, as she goes to school, students who may have no socks on, or oversized clothing, or being bullied because they are vulnerable or experience homelessness. And she was like, I want to do work in schools. And so we came up with the concept of Zion's Closet. And basically what it is we'll go into a Title I school. If you don't know what Title I is, that simply means that there's a higher concentration of students in the school that are impoverished and need extra support and resources and things like that. And uh, we started partnering with schools, and a principal would give us a classroom, and we'll literally go in there with volunteers and retrofit it. So the first one we launched was in APS with Dr. Spencer, and her elementary school has the largest concentrated uh, population of students who are unhoused, right? Like, they may have woke up in a shelter the night before, or family may be living in a car, so the family doesn't split up. I mean, whatever, motels, whatever it is, according to McKinney-Vento. And she gives us a classroom and we retrofit it. And that may look like washing machines and dryers in this classroom. It may look like a computer lab so parents can come in and not feel the shame of not having access to technology, so they can fill out job applications during the day. This looks like refrigeration where healthy produce can exists, just a respite space. Like, you think about people who go into coffee shops and do work, but what about parents who've been in a motel, or like sitting in a car all day? They need a respite space too. You can go in and it's beautified, and you can sit and just kind of decompress. It's a space where social workers and counselors can meet with parents in a non-discreet way, right? Like, you know what I mean, in a discreet way, where they don't have to feel the shame of sitting in the office and feeling like they don't have all of what they need to contribute. Man, we launched this. It's hygiene products, it's dish detergent, it's food, it's uniforms. We launched this closet, and we just launched the second one. But I'll never forget this educator walking a child into this room because the child's shoes had broken, and child's crying and being bullied on, laughed at in the class. And this teacher literally walks over to the shelf
Mhm.
and grabs his pair of shoes, places it on the child's feet, and they were new, and the joy returns. And it was just this moment of, like, you never know how a child is not going to connect with a lesson because they are so concerned about what they are socially dealing with. And this space seeks to fill that gap where students who may not have the extra support have the resources they need so they can be confident when they show up in classrooms. And so that is what Zion's Closet is all about. Right now, we have like 5 schools waiting. We just got our first school out of state in another city, in the city of Louisville, that reached out to try to bring it to another city. And so yeah, we want to start here, continue to grow, but also do this all around the country.
You guys are doing great work. Great work. Kudos to that. You have a quote. I have a quote here from you. It says, "Education is no longer just a talking point; it's a battleground." What does that mean?
Yeah. I mean, you think about it like um, so my research and um, my PhD has a public policy leaning, and so you'll hear me talk every now and then about a public policy. But like, if we really think about just since 2018, all of the things that have happened in terms of public policy surrounding education, right? You talk about 2018 school discipline and policing policies rolled back, right? There was a dear colleague letter that came out of that administration in 2018 that says we're gonna work to stop students from Black students who are disproportionately targeted from facing higher rates of suspensions,
Mhm.
expulsions, feeding into this mentality of the school to prison pipeline. And then like 2020 to 2022, you had book bans and curriculum restrictions, right? In schools, right? Restricting the teaching of, say like a Black student shows up in school and can't even access a book that has the type of representation within the context of the curriculum that speaks to, the lived experiences. And then in 2023, you have Supreme Court affirmative action ruling, right? Race conscious emissions were struck down by the Supreme Court, right? A decision framed as like progress beyond race, but one that failed to consider the impact on students who historically have faced systemic discrimination. And right, when you think about that, it places easier ways for colleges to deny applications, and it also places a large weight on HBCUs in regards to how many colleges that historically Black colleges and universities are able to you know actually serve uh, uh, Black students who are emerging from these types of communities. And then you have CRT restrictions, right? Which basically is a theory that teaches that there's systemic things embedded in how judicial systems actually target Black communities. And then you have Department of Education layoffs this year, right? 1,300 employees is probably climbing, right?
Mhm.
Uh, it's all of these things. Title I funding cuts, Disabilities Act cuts to serve students who show up in school and have all of these supports that are needed. And so when I say battleground, I'm literally talking about the continued educational redlining, as I'm coining it and phrasing it in the book, of students who come from historically marginalized communities that will face greater barriers from accessing higher education. That is like, you know what I mean? Like, we still have a higher concentration of students who are just now becoming first generational college graduates, or even college admitted students from their family context. And we have to ask why is this, right? I was working with a public school system in Louisville, Kentucky. We put on this conference for seniors. 40 plus seniors show up. It wasn't that type of conference that you would think. All of the graduating seniors that graduated this past year were Black students, predominantly, who were experiencing homelessness. I worked to have a college that I was a professor at present. It was the only college there. And for the first time, students learned what a FAFSA was. For the first time, they saw college present, was able to walk over to a table and read applications with imagery that looks like them. For the first time, they saw college as a opportunity to overcome and literally advance themselves, right? Right. Like, you think about this. This is happening real time today. That people who could be future doctors and lawyers and political leaders and thinkers and innovators and engineers and all of these things are kept out of the very thing, school, because of lack of funding or lack of exposure or whatever it may be. So that's why I say education is a battleground, and we have to fight to ensure that students, as early as elementary school, that's child that may be walking into a classroom that may be faced with the same types of challenges that I was faced with, that may not even be dreaming about college, and would be having an option to drop out, right? Children shouldn't be thinking about dropping out versus dreaming about a future. And then you think about AI revolution, right? And how it's going to wipe out jobs, right? Right now, you can walk into a restaurant and literally order food, and it's not from a person, it's from a computer screen. Computer screen. Right now, you can download an app and order a car to come pick you up, and it's not a physical human being that's driving the car. And so you think about access to STEM or STEAM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, arts, all of these things are you're able to access those types of careers only if you have access to higher education. And so, like, this should be something that we're talking about. We need to be addressing people who have the power to create policy that harms or creates the types of barriers for students not to be able to access the type of education that will support their potential. We need to be talking about going into Title I schools in communities, historically redline communities that have higher concentrations of poverty, to work with educators and students who may not have the same types of supports. We need to be talking about creating scholarships and tutoring and mentoring and all of those things that could literally change the trajectory of the life of us, a young scholar, right? I'm a product of that. My story should not be a rarity. My story should not be a rarity. And that's what I'm arguing in my book. And that's why I say it's so important.
Good segue. Tell me about your book, Dropout to Doctorate.
Yeah, so I wrote this book, From Dropout to Doctorate. It's a memoir. It chronicles my story of, like, overcoming a lot of what I've discussed. Reconciliation with my dad. How trauma shows up and is connected to public policy. The power of community and what that does to actually help students overcome, and how I went from being a teenager that ran away from home to being a professor at a college, HBCU, and reaching academic heights, or what I would consider a PhD, studying the very thing that I overcame. And so it is important. I wrote this book for the student in the trenches, right? It needs hope. I wrote it for the educators who's working every single day, asking and questioning, like, is my work mattering or making a difference? Yes, your work is mattering, right now and will forever. I wrote it for, those who consider themselves allies, or people who want to stand in solidarity with people who need extra support. And so it's all of that. It's all of what we've been discussing. Yep.
Okay. Now, and how do they get it? How do they get a copy?
Yeah, I just learned yesterday that you can literally physically walk into a Barnes and Noble and like grab it off the shelf. Like, that's what's you know what I mean? Like, that's
Congratulations.
cool, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
So you can get it in store at selected locations, but also you can order it online, any of your digital retailers. And if you do check it out and you like it, please leave a review, because reviews help the author get more exposure. And I'm sure you know that.
Absolutely. Yes, those reviews count. They really do. before we go, I mean, we're running out of time, but I want you to talk about Love Beyond Walls a little bit too.
Yeah. In short, Love Beyond Walls, I would define it as a community based organization that advocates on behalf of those who are experiencing homelessness and poverty in our city, Atlanta, but also in the country. And I would also say the world. We work to reframe uh, what it means to be unhoused in this country. As a matter of fact, I give talks about this all the time, and I also encourage people to not even call people experiencing homelessness homeless people, right? We need to reframe that idea around it, because homelessness is one of the only justice issues where you can be labeled for something that you don't have and then punished for trying to survive it. How do I know this? I mean, we just recently seen, um, you know, this administration say that they're going to evict people who are experiencing homelessness out of the capital in our country, right? And also place people in jail when research shows that it would cost less to actually provide housing for the entire population in that city versus placing them in jail, right? And so we do a lot of work to reframe, but also we help people get access to healthcare. We, partner with organizations that come in and do health checks, access to food, public sanitation and hygiene. We create mobile showers, grooming and support services. Sometimes we're partnering with like suit stores like Bespoketure that are donating suits so people can have clothing to go and do job interviews, right? We have access to technology. Sometimes we're reuniting people with their family members or helping individuals recover their identification card. I'll never forget, earlier this year, I was working with a veteran who served this country, but could not get his ID, right? And why? Because you need ID to get what? ID, but you also need address to verify that you can get. It's a whole mess. And so, like, you even think about some of those things related to ID. You can't open a bank account, get a job, cash a check, get housing without identification cards. And when cities do public sweeps, sometimes everything that a person owns and possesses is in a bag or in a tent or whatever. We do documentaries. We launched the first museum in 2019 that represents the subject of homelessness, called the Dignity Museum. It's housed in the shipping container, and it's mobile. And so we go around to college campuses, businesses everywhere to educate people about the experience of homelessness. And we just mobilize volunteers to do good in the community. And you just made me think about how much this is needed. And people normally ask me why. You listen to my story, you know why. Like, whenever you overcome something, you know, whatever I believe, whatever you're graced to overcome is also a part of the calling that you have to contribute to. And so I want to ensure that people don't feel the weight of stigma without knowing that they are loved, right? I want to make sure that people get a chance to eat, feel like they're supported, know that they're worth it, all of those things that matter and are essential to what it means to be human.
Oh, great. That's great work. Dr. Terence, I want to thank you for coming on the show. You spit a lot of knowledge out there for us, and a lot of the great things that you're working on. I want to encourage you to keep doing good in the community. Your teachers were right. You are a leader. They knew it back then, and you're leading now. But I want to thank you for coming on and telling us all about your book and about all the great things you're doing.
Yeah, I am deeply grateful. Thank you for your work. Uh, Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you for creating a space for parents to come on and talk about why it is important to continue to invest in Black children. Thank you for your advocacy and the ways in which you do as well, and thank you for just giving me an opportunity to hang out with you today. And I want to send it right back to you. Continue to do this great work.
all right, then. Stay behind backstage. I'll tell you a little bit more about the videos and stuff. So hang out. And a big shout to all of you for watching the replay of this episode of BACKtalk by Successful Black Parenting Magazine. Be sure you follow us on social media. Click on everything, follows, likes, the ads, all of that helps us to thrive as well. Until next time, I wish you all the best and much success. Take care and thank you for listening, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in to BACKtalk by Successful Black Parenting Magazine. We'll see you soon.